Hi, I'm Elizabeth Cornwell.
And I'm Rick Wingrove. Welcome to Road to Reason. Elizabeth, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to be talking about morality. And as most non-believers know, our morality is often called into question because we don't have a God to threaten us with eternal damnation to keep us in line. Additionally, far too many people are under the impression that not only is the morality based on the Ten Commandments in the Bible, but U.S. law is as well. Well, let's look into this myth by examining what the Ten Commandments actually said. What the frijoles? Well, God starts out by announcing, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And his first commandment is, you shall not have other gods before me.
Well, Elizabeth, what would be the penalty for breaking that one?
Death.
Death, okay.
Yeah.
Well, seems fair, I guess.
Yeah, then he also comes back and says, you shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth, which means I guess you can't draw any fish.
Well, wouldn't that seem to outlaw art in general, or drawing, or anything like that?
Possibly.
Well, that's fairly minor transgression. What's the penalty for that?
Oh, well, that one has to be death as well, I'm afraid. And you can't bow down to any of these graven images, or again, there's death, because as God points out, I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me.
That's even worse than death.
Yeah, pretty much. But showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So, I mean, is vengeance and jealousy really moral behaviors? Is the rule of only having one God, the God of Moses, really the basis of U.S. law? Is condemning the descendants of people you don't happen to like part of your moral fabric? Well, here's another commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain.
What's the penalty, Elizabeth?
Death.
Wow.
Remember to keep the Sabbath day, too. This is another commandment. And keep it holy. So for 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your manservant or your maidservant, or your cattle, or any sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that was in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
I'm almost afraid to ask, what is the penalty for that?
Rick, I'm glad you're asked. I'm going to give you an example, because at first the Israelites were a little confused too. This is explained in Numbers 15:32-36. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him into custody because it had not been made clear what should be done with him. And the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as the Lord commanded Moses.
Is it just me, or is that just a little harsh?
That seems a little far-fetched. And so again, we go to that question, is this really what U.S. law is based on? Do we give death penalty to be used for the crime of working on the Sabbath? Another commandment, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Again, is this really moral? What if someone's parents are harmful people? What if they beat their kids or willing to kill them after hearing voices commanding them to do so? Should a child honor a father who sexually abuses her? And again, what U.S. law is based on this?
Well, I mean, we're talking about kids sassing their parents, you know?
Basically, right.
And I'm afraid to ask again.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Kill them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now this is a good law commandment. You shall not murder. But you know, it's true murdering is not good, but that really only meant don't murder a member of your tribe. Don't murder another member of the Judaic tribe. This was made very clear with such biblical commandments as, well, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And
didn't they also command him to burn the crops too?
Oh, they burned the crops, everything. They were basically, we're talking genocide.
Went full Samuel Jackson on them.
That's right. and you know, and then there's of course the whole thing about that poor guy picking up sticks on the Sabbath. Isn't stoning someone to death actually murder? Well, now the commandment, thou shalt not steal. Well, that's good, but then it's okay to take concubines and livestock from defeated tribes. Oh, but maybe that's not stealing. Maybe that's just booty.
You know, killing and stealing, those are essentially humanist values anyway, and they've been long practiced by, well, pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Not always in every case, but it's a pretty popular set of rules that we can all live by.
That's right. And another commandment, which again is something that would have been in other tribes as well, was not to bear false witness against your neighbor. And of course, that's a good idea. But it's not a rule that humans didn't already have. Long before the invention of Judaism, the Sumerians had written laws about theft, among other things. And tort laws were also part of the Babylonians' code of Hammurabi.
Okay. You know, and if I may, the false witness, I believe, if I got this right, technically that refers to essentially their court system, such as it was.
Right.
You couldn't lie about somebody in court.
Right.
Other than that, it was kind of a pass on it. And by the way, I don't believe there's actually a death penalty on that.
I'm not really sure. We'll have to look that one up.
I think fair retribution was really the punishment for that.
Okay.
Kind of ran out of steam there on that one.
Yeah. Only when it offended, when it was personal against God, is there a death penalty. Now, you shouldn't covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his ass. Or anything else that happens to be your neighbor. And again, you know, tort law goes further back than the Ten Commandments. And
on that coveting thing, I believe there is not actually a penalty. Just a stern look, I believe, is what you get from God.
Don't covet your neighbor's ass, whatever you do.
Yeah, okay.
So let's do a quick comparison to alternative commandments, ones that humanists actually have put forth. Those who reject the Judaic-Christian traditions. A.C. Grayling, in his good book, he compiled a list of alternatives. These are: love well, seek the good in all things, harm no others, think for yourself, take responsibility, respect nature, do your utmost, be informed, be kind, be courageous. I mean, those seem like pretty good values.
They do. I would add to those: practice infinite patience and never ever hit a child.
I think that would be a good one. And then, what about Richard? He's always accused of being so strident and shrill. What does he have to say about his alternative view of the Ten Commandments? So he has written, "In all things strive to cause no harm. Treat your fellow human beings, your fellow living things, and the world in general with love, honesty, faithfulness, and respect. Do not overlook evil or shrink from administering justice, but always be ready to forgive wrongdoing, freely admitted and honestly regretted. Live life with a sense of joy and wonder. Always seek to be learning something new. Test all things. Always check your ideas against the facts, and be ready to discard even a cherished belief if it does not conform to them. Never seek to censor or cut yourself off from dissent. Always respect the right of others to disagree with you. Form independent opinions based on your own reason and experience. Do not allow yourself to be led blindly by others. And lastly, question everything."
You know, Elizabeth, those seem like fairly common sense things, which are humanist values, you know, from start to finish. So those seem much more rational and certainly relevant today, in today's world. Whereas the Ten Commandments could not be less relevant except for the killing and stealing.
Yeah, and of course, if you don't obey A.C. Grayling's or Richard's alternative Ten Commandments, you're not put to death.
Nobody gets killed.
Yeah, nobody gets killed, which is a good thing. So, yeah, it's, I mean, the issues of morality and being told, I mean, I'm sure you've faced this. What do you tell people when they say, well, where do you get your morality from?
Well, my answer to them is that atheism itself is not a moral code. It's basically an answer to one question. But by default, we are humanists, I think, at our core. And I think the foundation of all morality is human happiness. And that's how you tell if something's good for you or not. Yeah. Does it contribute to happiness? Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of atheists have spoken out on the issues of morality, and people like, well, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and others. Have you gleaned anything from any of the things that they've had to say publicly about issues of morality?
Well, I'll tell you somebody who I do like to read. Sam Harris is very good on this. I mean, they all speak to it, but Sam Harris came out with a new book, the name of which escapes me right this minute. But he talks about morality and human happiness and how there are certain things that we can measure that they make people generally happy, they're good for people, and certain things that are measurably bad for human beings. And the interesting thing about that is, once you're able to evaluate something, it's a subject of science at that point.
Right. And that's something that people don't understand, that science does add something to the question of morality. It can't make the final decision, but what it can do is give us information such as what harms someone, what causes pain, what can cause psychological pain as well as physical pain. And I think these are important issues to think about when we talk about punishing someone for a particular crime, or whether or not someone is responsible for even committing a crime. These are things that science can answer for us. But again, it's going to come down to humanist type values that will determine the final outcome.
And certainly punishment is part of that mix. When you punish people and you end up worse for doing it, that seems a little irrational. So I think punishment should fit the crime and should not result in a worse outcome for everybody.
Yeah. But when you think about the fact that the Bible, the Torah, the Old Testament has, in general, always had this vengeance mode, this idea that we must be vengeful, we must do the eye for the eye type vengeance. I mean, that's got to have an effect on people who are studying these books, that there's a feeling that you must be vengeful, that it's okay to be vengeful, and therefore, when we look at the Middle East, we have the sins of the fathers have been passed down to generation after generation after generation, and that sort of hatred has been built up over 1,000 years of constant vengeance and revenge, and it never ends.
And I understand vengeance. There are people who I'd like to see punished. I wish there were such a thing as hell, because there's some people who belong there. But our cultural propensity for vengeance is reflected in harsh prison sentences and people going to jail for victimless crimes, crimes of no consequence whatsoever. And it is absolutely counterproductive to our economy and just to the lives of people who when they end up in prison for some meaningless crime, such as smoking pot or something like that, nobody is helped by that. We are all diminished and hurt, measurably hurt by that. And we have 1 million people in prison.
Just for smoking
for
pot.
Crazy, yeah.
And things like that, yeah. The other thing about morality that a lot of people, they ask, well, where could morality have come from if it wasn't handed down by God? And of course, my first response is always, well, I hope you don't get your morality from the Old Testament, because you'd be not a very nice person to be talking to. But the fact is, morality has evolved over time, and it has to do, its basis is the fact that humans are social animals, and that we have the ability to be empathetic and to understand the pain that someone else may feel and understand when they are in discomfort. And that affects how we feel. When you're talking to someone and you can see that they're about to break down in tears, you don't just keep on pummeling them because we have this emotional response. And over time, morality has changed greatly in human societies. We see this transition from, let's think about the Middle Ages, when people would go out to watch people being drawn, quartered, and hung. And that was the entertainment for the day. So we see a much better society than we did even 500 years ago or even 100 years ago.
You know, one of the most brazen acts of historical revisionism ever is that the Christians claim that they essentially invented morality with the introduction of the Ten Commandments. But we know that the Code of Hammurabi predated the Ten Commandments by centuries. So looks like some of God's very best ideas were stolen. They were lifted.
They plagiarized.
Yeah.
I think that could be a death penalty in here.
I may have gone there, but also the fact that other cultures throughout the world, throughout history, predating the Ten Commandments, the Sumerians, the Chinese, well, everybody, just about anybody, has a moral code, and almost all of them, probably all of them, warn against or prohibit killing and stealing in some form. Even if these are not always strictly enforced, they're at least, I think that's been present. That's been one of the things that allowed us to live together as societies, have been those built-in prohibitions.
And one of the things we see too, especially with the advent of media, to the extent you have entirely different cultures in your living room, you will see different countries and peoples and in your living room, and our archaic brains don't really separate the fact that they're far, far away. We see their emotional stress, for example, when there's been hurricanes or floods or tsunamis and so on. And so we no longer have this tribal line of those are the only people we're good to, those are the only people we're not supposed to lie to, those are the only people that we're supposed to help. We have transgressed over those boundaries of tribalism, and we will help people we know we will never ever see, never speak to, don't even know their names, yet we'll send millions of dollars to help people in a faraway land. And that's, I think, such a huge change in the morality that is based in biblical form.
Yeah, I think we don't see the Christian or any religious trademark or patent on morality manifest in the real world. Christopher Hitchens said, "We keep on being told that religion, whatever its imperfections, at least instills morality. On every side, there is conclusive evidence that the contrary is the case, and that faith causes people to be more mean, more selfish, and perhaps, above all, more stupid." And I think we do see plenty of examples of that, and you'd expect some attenuation of that tendency in people of the book, but you know, I see them behaving as badly or worse than anybody else, and with full scriptural justification.
Yeah. And well, I mean, when we see anti-bullying legislation being brought in, and the people who are against it are people who say, well, we can bully if it's based on religion. So that kind of shows that this biblical vengeance and hatefulness is being taught. It's okay to bully someone if they happen to be gay because it goes against biblical teachings. So you can be mean as you want to someone, and you know that's happening today. I mean, people talk about these are just stories, allegories, but you have to ask, what are they actually teaching? What are all allegories about genocide teaching? And in an organization called the Good News Club, which is all over the United States and in other areas of the world, they go into public schools and do Bible studies, but they're actually quite seditious. And the Good News Club actually, in one of their lessons, teaches about the Amalekites and about how Saul disobeyed God and and the lesson is not that genocide is bad. The lesson is that Saul disobeyed God because he left the king alive and he kept some of the better animals for himself and his army.
Well, I've heard of the Good News Club, and all I can say is that surely no one at this late date in the 21st century, 40 years after men walked on the moon, surely no one would ever teach that genocide is a good thing, right?
But that's what they're teaching. That's what they're teaching to 4-year-olds, that genocide is okay if God commands it. And you've got to think, what's that happening to the mind of these very impressionable young children? And they teach these children that their friends are going to go to hell because they're not the right kind of Christian, that their friends are going to go to hell and burn for eternity, and that that's okay. If you think that your God, who you worship and is a good God, thinks it's okay for somebody to spend all of eternity in hell, burning, and their skin regrowing so it can be burned again, if you think that's a good thing, what does that do to your mind?
You know, every time I think that the universe can't possibly be that lame, I found out it's even lamer than I thought possible. There's a documentary that just started showing on HBO called Mea Maxima Culpa. And it's about the priest pedophile scandal. And it details when we really first became aware of it in the 60s. One priest at a school for the deaf was abusing, raping boy after boy after boy. And we find out that the Catholic Church, certainly in this case, is a criminal enterprise. They are hiding these people. They're shielding them from prosecution. They're protecting them before the victims. And this has been going on not just since the 60s. The oldest records they have of this are from the 4th century. And not only that, every record, every instance of this that is recorded, and they're all supposed to be recorded, are not sent to the police, they're sent to the Vatican. And these all went across the desk of one person. That person is now the Pope. He ran the office, I believe it's called the Office of the Defense of the,
of the faith, I think, isn't it? Defense of the faith.
And that is the Office of the Inquisition, and the person sitting in that was Cardinal Ratzinger. So he knew about every one of them, and he was instrumental in helping to hide these people, to shield these people, and recycle them back into the community. It's like they don't get that this is wrong.
Yeah.
So,
and that's, I mean, I think that's one of the big questions about what religious people, and not all religious people, but some religious people, organizations, when they talk about what they think are immoral. For example, they talk about being gay being immoral, or women using birth control methods being immoral, or abortion is immoral. And they talk about these things, and they talk about that they seem to know and can judge what morality is. But when it comes down to things like pedophilia, about the morality of someone being happy, of someone being able to marry the person who they truly love, of being able to live without harassment, these are the things that humanists consider as being moral. To let people have a good life, to have the ability to have a good life. And it seems like it's a little bit backwards as to how they want to see morality and how humanists want to see morality. Yet I have to say that all the religious people I've met on a one-to-one basis have all been good moral people. And I can't say that all atheists are absolutely perfect and live moral lives. We all falter and have issues. So it's not owned by either, but religion certainly gives you a reason to carry out some pretty awful things.
Well, true, and you make a good point. It's not that Christians or atheists own morality. We're all kind of subject to the same stresses that eventually or occasionally, inevitably, bring out the worst in all of us. So we see Christians behaving badly, and as we all know, even in the atheist community, there are some people behaving badly. But a lot of the things that religion has gotten away with over the centuries has been scripturally justified. And you know, and again, you make an important point that this is not all religious people. We all know that the vast majority of religious people are probably just trying to do the right thing, which we all are. Mm-hmm. But the instructions they get in the Scripture can cause some pretty strange takes on what is moral, what is acceptable. So,
well, the physicist Steven Weinberg said, I'm not going to quote exactly, but it basically was, there will always be good people who do good things. There will always be bad people who do bad things. But only religion can cause good people to do bad things. And I think that's true. I think using religion to justify genocide is I mean, that certainly was the case with Hitler. Strong Catholic nation, strong nation of Luther who hated Jews, and it was justified by religion. They were Christ killers. And this is what we see when religion gets a hold. And we know that the Catholic Church was in quite strongly with Hitler, and Hitler was very supportive. And of course, there's Stalin, and you were telling me something a little bit earlier about Stalin, and you know, not being quite the atheist that people like to make him out to be.
Stalin, I believe, attended seminary.
Yes.
And I think it's actually somebody else telling you that, but yeah, he was. He went to seminary, but bear in mind he was also crazy, and he was a genocidal maniac. And so he, if not strictly religious, what he was doing, it was at least ideological extremism. One thing it wasn't was atheism. He didn't do anything in the name of atheism.
Right.
You know.
And he also, didn't he also work closely with the Russian Orthodox Church on, you know, he brought them on board, and they helped him when they were at war. It was God and country sort of thing, and the Russian Orthodox Church was extraordinarily helpful in that.
Yeah, I believe that some of them did point fingers at where the Jews were hiding frequently and helped him, as did the Catholics. And it's worth noting that, you know, we get a lot of blame for Hitler. They always want to blame us for Hitler. Hitler was no atheist. Hitler was a Catholic who was never excommunicated.
Well, I think we're out of time. We could go on for a long time, but please check out our website and our Facebook and our YouTube. Thank you.
There's a few episodes already on YouTube of the show, so look for those. There's a phone number on there that you can call in, leave us some comments, and we're going to start addressing comments on the air. So read your Bible.